In today's video, I am thinking about retirement in Europe versus Southeast Asia. There are many thousands of people who are considering moving abroad and leaving the UK for retirement. Multiple factors are taken into consideration when making the choice between which continent and country to retire in, which may include cost of living, quality of life, the weather, crime levels, the type of tax system and taxation levels, and the proficiency of English. Another factor may be the number of expats which are already in the country of relocation. The top 5 countries in Europe for UK expat retirees receiving a UK state pension are Spain, France, Ireland, Germany, and Italy. And the top 5 countries in Southeast Asia for UK expat retirees receiving a UK state pension are Thailand, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the Philippines. Some of us will choose a European country due to the relative close proximity and familiarity, but others will consider Southeast Asia due to the relatively low cost of living and hot climate. The following table shows a comparison of Europe and Southeast Asia, rated with a set criteria to see which one gets the most points and which is the most desirable country on paper to retire to. The countries which get the most points for the chosen categories may surprise you. So just on the spreadsheet here, so we have the continent and then the country. Then we have the cost of living in US dollars per month for a single person. And then the cost of living in pound. And then the cost of living in euro. We then have the Human Development Index figure, which is a score out of 1.0, with 1.0 being the best. We then have the Quality of Life score, which is out of 100, with 100 being the best. We then have the Pleasant Weather Ranking score, with 1 being the best. And then we have the Freedom Index score, which is out of 10, with 10 being the best. The Life Expectancy score in the country. And then we have the Crime Index figure, which is out of 100, with the lower scores being the best, so the least crime. And then we have the Safety Index score, which is again out of 100, with the highest figure being the best, giving more safety. And then we have the type of tax system in the country and the percentage of English speakers. So the last column shows the number of points that the country has. So the first country on our list is Turkey, where the cost of living is the lowest on this list for the European countries, which is $891 per month, which is £661 per month, which is €775 per month. So Turkey also has a HDI figure, which is above our 0.7 threshold, which is 0.853. And then we have a weather ranking of 10, which is a very good score. The Freedom Index figure is relatively low, so there's no green on this figure. And the life expectancy is less than 78, so there's no green there. The Crime Index figure is more than 40, so no green there. And the Safety Index figure is less than 60, so no green there. And the percentage of English speakers in Turkey is only 15, so no green there. So Turkey has a total of 3 points. And then we have Bulgaria, which has come out with a score of 7, which is very good. And next is Greece, which comes out with a score of 6 points. So the 6 points for Greece were from the HDI figure, the Quality of Life, the Pleasant Weather Ranking, which is 1, which is the best weather in the world. And then we have the Freedom Index score of 7.7, a life expectancy which is relatively very high, which is 81.5. And then the percentage of English speakers in Greece is 51, which is extremely high. And then we have Portugal. So Portugal is actually rated better than Greece and comes out with 8 points. And then we have Spain, which comes out with 8 points. Next we have Italy, which came out with a score of 6 points. And then we have Cyprus, which comes out with a score of 8 points. 72% of people speaking English in Cyprus, which is extremely high. And the crime index score in Cyprus is 33.3, which is relatively extremely good. And in Malta, we have 5 points. France comes out with a score of 5 points. And the crime index figure in France is 55.8, which is relatively very high. And then we have Croatia, which comes out with a score of 8. So, for the countries on our list, we have 4 countries which come out with 8 points, which are Portugal, Spain, Cyprus, and Croatia. So moving on to Southeast Asia. So the countries that have been selected are Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. So Thailand comes out with 6 points, which may surprise some people, as it's a much lower score than some of the countries in Europe. So Thailand, the cost of living is $882 per month, which is £653 per month, which is €767, which is an extremely low cost of living relative to the European countries. So the HDI figure in Thailand is 0.798, which is not the best, but it's over our threshold of 0.7. So then we have 13 for the weather ranking, which is relatively very good. And then we have 36.4 for the crime index figure, and a 63.6 for the safety index figure. And the proficiency of English in Thailand is 27%. So Thailand's let down a bit by quality of life, which is 57 out of 100. And then the freedom index score is 6.7, which is less than our 7 threshold. And the life expectancy in Thailand is 76.4, which is just below our threshold of 78. So the crime index figure is actually relatively quite good in Thailand. And then the proficiency of English, as I said, is 27%, which is relatively not too bad. So Thailand gets 6 points. So Malaysia comes out with a cost of living of $818 per month, which again is relatively very low, which is £605. So the HDI figure is 0.819, the quality of life is 68, and the weather ranking is 21. The freedom index score is 7.1, which is just above our threshold of 7. But Malaysia is let down by the crime index figure, which is 48. So the safety index score is 52 as a result. Malaysia also has a territorial tax system, so you wouldn't pay any tax on your foreign sourced income. So that gets a green as well. And the proficiency of English in Malaysia is 57%, which is extremely good. So Malaysia gets 7 points, and it also gets the most points out of all of the countries in Southeast Asia on this list. So Indonesia comes out with 4 points. And then Vietnam comes out with 5 points. And the Philippines comes out with 5 points. So when taking the 4 countries which received 8 points head to head, Portugal comes out with 3 points when compared to the other countries. So Portugal is number 2 in the weather ranking. The Freedom Index score was 8.6 and the Crime Index figure was 33.3. So 3 points for Portugal. And Spain comes out with 2, Cyprus comes out with 3, and then Croatia comes out with 1. So out of the 4 countries that were previously rated as 8, 2 of them come out with 3 points, which are Portugal and Cyprus. So in the final head-to-head, the comparison is between Portugal and Cyprus. So the cost of living in Portugal is 1452 in dollar per month, which is 1074 in pound per month, which is 1263 in euro. So the weather ranking in Portugal was number 2, and in Cyprus it's number 11. So both of these countries have got very good weather, but Portugal comes out on top. So the Freedom Index score in Portugal is 8.6 compared to Cyprus 8.3. And then we have the life expectancy. So in Portugal the life expectancy is 82.3 and in Cyprus is 81.6. So very similar, and strangely enough, the crime index figure in Portugal is exactly the same as the one in Cyprus, which is 33.3. which means that the safety index score in Portugal is 66.7 and in Cyprus as well. So Portugal had a very favourable non-habitual residency visa previously, but it's now been tightened up a bit, which is the IFICI, which is making it more difficult for people to get into the country, especially from the UK. And in Cyprus, the tax rates are very low, practically non-existent in some cases, which makes Cyprus a very favourable tax destination. But it's not quite a territorial tax system, so it doesn't actually get the green. So the percentage of English in Cyprus is 72, which is amazing, compared to Portugal, which has 27%. But based on the criteria on this table, Portugal comes out just on top with 6 points, and Cyprus with 5. So Portugal is the winner, and appears to be the most favourable country to retire to for UK retirees for any of the countries on the list from Europe or Southeast Asia. So the outcome is that out of the 10 European countries selected, 4 of them got 8 out of 10 points, which were Portugal, Spain, Cyprus and Croatia. The highest scoring country out of the Southeast Asian countries was Malaysia with 7 points. When carrying out a head-to-head analysis of the 4 countries which achieved the 8 score, which were all European countries, 2 of the countries get 3 points in the head-to-head for being the best scoring in the categories. These were Cyprus and Portugal. In the final head-to-head, which is a comparison between Portugal and Cyprus, Portugal comes out on top with 6 points compared to Cyprus with 5 points. The Southeast Asian countries are largely let down by low quality of life scores, low freedom index scores and low life expectancy scores. Malaysia scores high in nearly all of the categories, but is let down by a relatively high crime rate, which may come as a surprise to some. So the conclusion is that if a high quality of life, good life expectancy and a high level of freedom are important factors in your decision, then Europe may be a more acceptable choice, with Portugal being the top choice for the criteria selected, and Cyprus being a close second. Okay guys, that was retirement in Europe versus Southeast Asia. I'll see you on the next one.